You don't get the penalty for a DV charge, is what I'm saying. Should you? That's another discussion. That's for you to talk about amongst yourselves in the comments. I'm going to be 100% honest. I don't feel good that this is what I think. I feel like a piece of shit, but it is. It just is. And I'm going to say it and I'm going to feel bad but I have to get it out there because I need to get these things out of my head so that they can stop plaguing me, and then someone can tell me I'm a piece for it and we can have a fight about it, or honestly I won't fight with you because I agree. I genuinely, like, from the beginning, from the first episode of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, I said this Dakota guy is a fucking loser and he is using this woman so bad, and she's an idiot because she doesn't even see it. That's my opinion as a person who grew up with people with really, if it's in the DSM-5, it's in my family. If the flurry of drama surrounding the Women of Mom Talk has somehow passed you by, first of all, get on your knees and pray to God and thank him that you have not been bombarded by all of this information. But second of all, I am here to give you a quick summary about what's been going on. Their de facto leader, Taylor Frankie Paul, had been announced as the Bachelorette about a year before the 4th season of the show came out. Filming had concluded. It seemed, based off of all of the reports, that she had in fact found someone, although there was some drama after her season of The Bachelorette ended, as there always is with Taylor. The 4th season looked to have a lot of hype, at least from what I was able to see on Reddit. People were very excited about this new season of the show. And if I'm remembering correctly, it is one of, if not Hulu's most streamed reality TV show. The women were getting more and more opportunities thrown at them. Whitney is in the midst of a sold out Chicago run. She broke the record that fellow reality television star Ariana Madix had set in 2024, if I'm remembering correctly, with her own Chicago run, which I went and saw. She was really good. Jen had just done Dancing with the Stars in a huge Dunkin' Donuts commercial with Ben Affleck, and we were starting to see these women who were a part of a more niche side of TikTok pop up in the mainstream a lot more. Celebrities were coming out and talking about how much they love the show and how obsessed they are with the women and their feelings on certain cast members. Like, it was clear that the show and this side of TikTok had moved from the fringe to the mainstream. And the centerpiece, the crown jewel of that move, was Taylor Frankie Paul. Taylor had been the center of the show and the center of Mom Talk from the beginning. She was the de facto leader. She's the one who essentially started this ragtag group of hot, young Mormon moms on TikTok dancing half naked, who all seemed to be connected vaguely, but nobody really knew how, until she made it very clear that some of them were not just friends and TikTok colleagues, but also partners in what she called a soft swinging group. That revelation on TikTok Live is what launched Mom Talk into kind of the public awareness. You started to get more mainstream outlets posting about them back in 2022. And then in 2023, Hulu ordered The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, this show about these. So Taylor really started it all. And it only made sense that if Hulu/ABC/Disney wanted to make more content featuring the women of Mom Talk and access these women's like high levels of popularity and utilize their large followings to get more people to watch their now dying franchise, The Bachelorette, they would go to Taylor out of all of the women in the group. No shade to any of the other castmates of Mom Talk. No, they're not all that interesting without Taylor. They all have their own things going on and their own storylines, but Taylor is the one who's bringing the drama and who's bringing the life to the show, for better and, as we saw throughout season 4, absolutely for worse. She's also the most followed member of Mom Talk, so the possibility of getting more new viewership to The Bachelorette was very high, and she was going to make the season of The Bachelorette incredibly dramatic. I think with casting Taylor Frankie Paul, they were trying to reverse engineer a second Hannah Brown season. You get this very religious, but also kind of like wild, outspoken air sign to lead this franchise and see what happens when she encounters these men who might expect traditionalism and traditional values from her when she is not the traditional girl that they're looking for. Now, I mean, the most controversial thing about Hannah Brown, the most like non-traditional thing about her was that she was willing to tell a man that he was wrong and to fight for her right to have sex outside of marriage. Taylor Frankie Paul is a lot more controversial than that. Like I said, she's very volatile. She's very emotionally unstable. Was married prior. She implicated herself in this whole soft swinging scandal. She has a baby father who she's not married to. And she is a member of the Mormon Church, which has always kind of existed and really thrived on the fringes of American society. Her and her Mom Talk group really embody the contradictions of the Mormon Church. This highly and like obsessed with sex institution that is also incredibly puritanical and misogynistic. And people knew that Taylor was not going to be a good cast for The Bachelorette. We'll be talking more about her DV arrest from 2023, but a lot of people when she was cast brought that up and said, we're worried about her being in this house full of all of these men when we know this about her and about her past relationship. That didn't really seem to give ABC, Hulu, Disney, any kind of pause. We watched her on the show, like I said, be very emotionally reactive and seem to react disproportionately to relatively minor slights or offenses that others perpetuate against her. And probably weirdly, like, it's weird that it wasn't the DV thing, but that it was actually this. But the biggest problem that a lot of people had was that she's clearly was still deeply entangled with her ex/baby father, Dakota. For the past 4 seasons of The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, we have been watching this woman be incapable of escaping this man's grasp. It seems really like she wants to, and she wants to get away from him, and she knows that she deserves more than him, but she cannot stop herself. She keeps getting sucked into him and his orbit, and the results are disastrous for both of them, honestly. They are in, and a lot of people in Mom Talk have acknowledged this very toxic, abusive spiral towards one another. So when she was cast as the Bachelorette, a lot of people were like, but she's basically in a relationship with this guy. Like, they have sex every other time that they see each other, so how is any of this going to work? But ABC decided we're moving ahead with Taylor as the Bachelorette. We're going full hog on this. And they filmed an entire season of television. Now, ramping up to when this season was going to be released, they did something that I think was actually pretty clever, which is schedule season 4 of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives to come out a week or 2 weeks before this season of The Bachelorette. So people would have Taylor fresh in their minds and be more inclined to tune into The Bachelorette because they had just watched Taylor act a fool on Secret Lives of Mormon Wives season 4. And now they wanted to see how she was going to react in this Bachelorette scenario and whether she was going to be able to give up Dakota, because that has been kind of the like, will they, won't they driver of the entire series, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, since it began. That is not what happened. What happened was that the season of Bachelorette got canceled. And it got canceled because newly surfaced video from Taylor's 2023 domestic violence arrest came to light. There is video of, and I've watched it. It's very upsetting. I don't recommend that anybody go watch it, but I will describe it to you if that's something that you think that you can handle. Let me back up a little bit actually and describe the sequence of events. So right around the time that Secret Lives of Mormon Wives season 4 came out, there was a report that surfaced that Taylor had been charged, arrested, cited, something for DV once again. Dakota had filed another DV charge against Taylor. And then throughout that week, people were having a discussion about this charge was filed in late February of 2026. Throughout the week that we found this out, people were having discussions about her 2023 arrest and how this seems to be a pattern for her and why she was even on the show and her behavior on season 4 of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives and how that could be like playing into her seeming pattern of DV with Dakota. And then mere days prior to the premiere of Bachelorette, the video of Taylor and Dakota dropped. So what you see in the video is basically Taylor beating Dakota, punching him, choking him, not choking him with her hands, but like she's got him in a headlock during a lot of it. And he's like yelling at her and she's yelling back at him. And at one point she says to him, "You did this to me, like you know what you did and that's why this is happening." And she's like grabbing him and dragging him all over the room. He manages to get out of her grasp and then she starts throwing chairs at him. She throws a stool at him. That doesn't connect. She throws another stool at him. And then he notices that her daughter is on the couch. And he says to her, "Look, your daughter's right here. You're doing this with your daughter in the room." Her eyes are completely like blacked out. Like you can see that she's not there. And she throws another stool. It bounces off the couch because now he's like hiding behind the couch. It bounces off the couch and it hits her daughter. And her daughter starts crying. And her daughter was 5 when this was filmed. I watched the saga play out in slow motion as all of this was coming out. And it seemed like throughout the days, I just knew that the season of Bachelorette was not going to premiere. And I will tell you, the whole discourse from start to finish, from the first DV arrest that happened this year in February to the video coming out and the season of Bachelorette being canceled, I felt this pit in my stomach because I felt like I understood where she was coming from and it made me feel sick because I know the difference between right and wrong. I know I've never done this, but I know it's not right to be violent with your partner. I know it's not right to say mean words to your partner, to tap dance on their insecurities. And I also know what it is like to be on the other side of that and to lash out. And that is the beginning of kind of the discourse that I want to have about this whole situation, which is that I've seen a lot of people, particularly male survivors of domestic violence at the hands of women, say people are being very dismissive about this whole situation and assuming that they know exactly what's going on, assuming that they know that this is reactive abuse, assuming all of these things, filling in all of these blanks for Taylor. And I don't want to defend her, and I'm not going to. I can only say why I think a lot of people, women in particular, are looking at the video, are looking at the news, how it unfolded the week leading up to what was supposed to be the biggest moment of her career, and coming to the conclusion that Dakota was never going to let this season of The Bachelorette premiere. He had to stop it by any means necessary, and he was going to go nuclear if he needed to do it. And that's not a conclusion that I think people are coming to lightly or in a vacuum. I do think that if Dakota was more conventionally attractive, people would be more inclined to defend him because people just think that attractive people are better. That's just like science. It's also something that we saw in the situation with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Johnny Depp not only is very conventionally attractive, but he's been America's sweetheart for decades. So like people were inclined to defend him and his actions at all costs. So I think if Dakota was the one who was famous as opposed to Taylor, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. Everyone would be like heavy-handedly condemning Taylor and raising Dakota up. But because Taylor is the one who's in the public eye, because she, in my opinion, is more conventionally attractive than him, and because we have 4 seasons worth of television evidence of how he has behaved towards her and the relationship dynamic, the response has been a lot more polarized than I think anyone really expected that it would be. I'll say that on Reddit, I have seen a lot of people condemning Taylor, calling her a monster, saying that she's horrible, and expressing horror at the questioning of a victim of domestic violence. On platforms like TikTok and Instagram, I've seen a lot more people say, we're acting as though we don't know, like, the situation with them. And I've seen some horrible things too. I made a video that went semi-viral on TikTok about the situation. I said in that video that I can't defend Taylor and her actions. And someone literally commented, "Why can't you defend her? She didn't do anything wrong." And I think that that is the wrong way to approach the situation. I think that things like that are just completely hateful and not good. And I don't think that we should put that type of mindset towards DV out into the world, whether the victim is a man or a woman. So I'm going to speak with a little bit more candor now and talk. It's hard because, again, I don't want to cause harm, but I also feel like this is something that I have to say. And I realized this morning that watching that video of Taylor in 2023, I wasn't just seeing myself when I was in my relationship. I felt like I wasn't just seeing myself in that situation. I was seeing my mother in her emotionally abusive relationship. I was seeing my sister in her abusive relationships. I was seeing my niece. I was seeing my cousins. I was seeing literally every woman in my family who has been through a DV situation and how they have reacted in those moments. And for me to think that the man who did that to them would be able to successfully convince the entire world that the people that I love and care about were not the victims, but were in fact the perpetrators. That is what caused my gut reaction to be, this can't be. It can't be that she is simply an abuser and she's just this man who she is in a relationship with. There has to be something else going on. There has to be some level of reaction happening. There had to have been some like weight that was put on her to have her lash out at this level, the way that we are seeing on this video. And that is a rationalization. And that is not right. It's not good. It's not like unproblematic, but it comes from somewhere. It comes from an experience. Like I said, every woman in my family, except one that I can think of off the top of my head, has been abused by their partner. And a lot of it I have seen firsthand. I've been that child on the couch. And I remember watching the video and thinking back to it, like the second time I watched it, I was not seeing myself in Taylor. I was seeing my mom in Taylor, and I was seeing myself in the child on the couch. And thinking about her as every woman in my family who has been married to an evil man, and yes, I'm counting my father in this. I love him fiercely, but he did some horrible things and has been just swallowed by that man completely to the point where they just absolutely lose it. Some of us had grandmothers who would like hit our grandfathers on the head with a cast iron frying pan because she was tired. She was tired of what he was doing to her. And that was the only way that she could find a way to even the score. Once again, I say it doesn't make it right. It just is me trying to contextualize what that reaction is. And this is a weight that I think most women, particularly women who have survived DV, who have grown up in households with DV, carry with us throughout our lives, where we cannot look at a video of a woman throwing things at a man and go, oh, well, she's just doing this because that's who she is as a person. Because we wouldn't see ourselves do that. We wouldn't see our loved ones do that. Our mothers, daughters, nieces, cousins, friends. We didn't see them do that. We saw them get victimized, be piled on, and then finally lash out. And a lot of us saw them be punished more for lashing out than the man who spent the whole day abusing them was punished for abusing them that whole day. We have this tendency in our culture to simplify things, take them down to brass tacks, strip them of all context, and say, this person is bad, this person was done bad too, that is the whole situation, we need to throw away the bad person, and let's move on. We don't talk about why bad people do the bad things that they do, because I think if we did, we would have to address a rot at the center of Western society that we're not ready to address yet. I see like these reports. I saw that first report in 2023 and I thought to myself, and again, this is not great, but I'm being very vulnerable right now. So like, please be kind to me. Well, what did he do? Like, why would she have reacted like that? Why would it have even gotten to a point where they were screaming that much and things were being thrown and a child was hurt? Because we don't have this conception in our minds of women as people who will abuse people because that is who they are as a person, right? We have a conception of like, if a woman is abusing someone, it is because they are reacting to something that that person did. And then when the arrest from February came up, I, like a lot of people, thought, well, this is convenient timing. The Bachelorette is supposed to premiere in a couple of weeks. This arrest is from February. Why is it all of a sudden coming out now? And then the video being dropped days before the Bachelorette premieres. Again, a lot of people saying this is highly convenient. Why is this all happening right now? I keep thinking about that D'Angelo Wallace video because he made a lot of points that are very valid of just like, why does a survivor have to think about whether the timing is convenient or not if they're going to come out and tell their story? I think that's fair. I think there's a world in which Dakota is a battered man. He has been being abused by Taylor their entire relationship, and she's a horrible person, and she skates by because she's a woman and she's small, and people think that a small woman can't hurt such a big man. And so he's been suffering in silence for years, and he cannot escape her grasp. That is a possibility of what's happening. And so all of these DV arrests are because that is genuinely who she is as a person, and it's all finally coming to light, and he is finally going to be vindicated and free to share his story on his own terms. I also know that there's a lot of stories of women who have been abused by their partners for years and finally start fighting back. And the day they fight back is the day that the man decides that he's going to call the police. And then he beats her again for years and years. She fights back, doesn't do anything, and then he calls the police on her. And there is a documented history of her having DV charges because he's calling the police on her, and she is suffering in silence the entire time. We literally have like the term battered wife syndrome because there is an understanding that years and years of physical abuse can take such a toll on someone mentally that they get to a point where the only thing that they can think to do is unalive the person who is abusing them. And so I live with all of these realities in my head at the same time. And I live with the reality that it could just be the simplest story, which is Taylor is an abuser, Dakota is a victim. He's calling the police because he's finally feeling safe and comfortable to unleash the truth, and he had to stop her from getting the Bachelorette, being famous on this high of a platform, because if he didn't stop her, then everyone would just be loving this absolutely horrible person who is an abuser. That's a possibility. I think there's a way, and probably the truest thing is somewhere in the middle, you know, whether Dakota is purely a victim or Taylor is purely a victim, whether either of them has been calculating this whole situation. Regardless, I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, and the truth is probably that they both have been entangled with one another so thoroughly that it's kind of hard to parse where perpetrator and victim starts and ends. Part of that is because they both have addictive personalities, and they both have things that they're dealing with that have not been diagnosed or properly addressed or properly therapized. The literal trauma bond. Like it's kind of like a misnomer, I guess you could say, or a misunderstanding that a trauma bond is just like two people who were traumatized and then bonded because of the trauma. No, trauma bond is like a therapeutic term to describe the way that you bond with your partner in an abusive dynamic. They are traumatizing you and you bond with them further because they are traumatizing you. I do really understand people online who are saying, like, I don't understand why people are so reticent to condemn Taylor as an abuser or to view what she has done to Dakota as an abuser, as abuse. And I say that because I've been in that situation from multiple angles. You know, people are really saying that the only people that they feel sorry for 100% in the situation are the children. And that's because the children are the only people who are 100% victims in the situation. They didn't ask to be born into this. They didn't ask to have parents who struggle to regulate their emotions, who will smear one another in the press, who will be so blinded with rage that they'll throw a stool at their partner and accidentally hit them. And they didn't ask to witness these types of shouting matches. I think that instinct is understandable but dishonest about the realities of the world and the realities of abuse. And the reality is that Dakota could be emotionally and mentally abusing Taylor, and he doesn't deserve to be beaten and put into a headlock. And Taylor could be physically and emotionally or mentally abusing Dakota, and she doesn't deserve She doesn't deserve to spend the rest of her life struggling and suffering because of that. You might disagree with that, and there are times when I do disagree with that, like certain situations where I do think like, oh no, this person who has perpetuated this abuse needs to be stoned. But that's also not the society that we live. You don't get the death penalty for a DV charge, is what I'm saying. Should you? That's another discussion. That's for you to talk about amongst yourselves in the comments. She doesn't deserve him emotionally manipulating her and mentally abusing her because she is physically beating him. And he doesn't deserve to be physically beaten because she is being emotionally and mentally abused. Like, those two things, they don't, honestly, like, the best situation would be for them to get away from each other forever, but they can't do that because they have a child together. So I say all that, and I also say we mourn for the children because, like I said, the children are 100% innocent victims in this. And also, some of us were that child at a certain point who sat in the room and watched their parents scream at each other and throw things at each other and beat each other. And there was nothing that we could do about it. And we learned to be quiet and mousy because that was the safest thing possible to do. Watching that little girl sit on that couch not moving during that footage was so heartbreaking because I know what it's like. I know you're like, I don't want them to notice that I'm here and start in on me because they're not going to stop screaming at each other. They wouldn't do that. They're too like wrapped up in their own stuff as parents. I know what that position is like. I also know that I have emotional regulation skills. And so whenever I have been that level of angry in front of someone who I have to care for, like a person who I have a relationship with where I am expected to care for them like a parent would care for them, I will shelve the anger. I'll put it somewhere else because I can regulate my emotions and I can say this is not the time and this person does not deserve to be subjected to whatever I'm about to say or do, and I'll do it later. But I don't think Taylor Frankie Paul has emotional regulation skills. We've watched her on television for years. I'm going to be 100% honest. I don't feel good that this is what I think. I feel like a piece of shit, honestly. But it just is. And I'm going to say it and I'm going to feel bad. But I have to get it out there because I need to get these things out of my head so that they can stop plaguing me. And then someone can tell me I'm a piece of shit for it and we can have a fight about it. Or honestly, I won't fight with you because I agree. I genuinely, like, from the beginning, from the first episode of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, I said this Dakota guy is a fucking loser. He is a loser and he is using this woman so bad, and she's an idiot because she doesn't even see it. The thing that's hard for me about Mormonism, Mormon women in particular, is I understand how thoroughly they are trained to believe that men are the end all be all of existence, because in Mormonism you literally cannot go to the highest level of heaven if you are not married. And if you get divorced, there's even like a question of if you'll be able to ascend to that highest level of heaven. Like, you basically have to be an immaculate woman in a heterosexual marriage, not even necessarily monogamous. Like, you're not sleeping with anyone else. That man can, but you're not sleeping with anyone else in order to get to heaven. And you need a man to like you enough to marry you in order for that to happen. And so I understand the desperation. I understand the the actual need. Like, they feel an actual need primally inside of them to have a man close to them, because without that man, you're basically worthless. That is what the religion teaches. And so she's kind of primed to be used. She's primed to be targeted by, and genuinely all of the women in Mom Talk are primed to be targeted by fucking losers and used because of this mindset in the Mormon church. And then to hear that he got her pregnant so soon after they started dating, of course she's keeping the baby because Mormon, there's no like other option. The baby is staying. So now they're tied to one another forever. But the one thing he couldn't get her to do was marry him. That was his one failure. And this was my theory, and I had not seen the video of her throwing the stools at him. This is what I thought from the beginning, which is he is trapping her keeping her close to him because she's a millionaire. She has endless earning potential for the future because this mom talk thing has taken off so greatly. She basically just continually fails up. I'm so interested to see what happens after this whole DV situation. He wanted to marry her so that he would have access to her wealth. She wouldn't marry him, and he decided that he was going to spend the rest of her life punishing her for refusing to marry him. It's a problem every season of the show, except season 3. Season 3, he's kind of like, Taylor broke up with me, I'm accepting it. But season 1, he's like, why won't you marry me? Marry me, marry me, marry me. She won't do it. Her family's trying to pressure her. He goes and talks to her mom to pressure her. She won't do it. She's like, I don't want to do it. This is the one way that I can maintain my autonomy. She had literally just gotten out of a divorce when she met him. She was in a very vulnerable situation when she met him. She had just blown up her whole life by revealing the swinging thing on live on TikTok. She wasn't posting for a while because she had just blown up her whole life. Her husband had decided to leave her. She wanted to work on the marriage with her first husband, Tate, and he was like, I don't want to do it. You were unfaithful to me. You were getting ready to leave me. I don't want to work on this marriage with you anymore. And so they got divorced, and that was clearly very traumatizing to her. She talks about how that really triggered her abandonment problems, which I know you hear that and you go like, how could that trigger you? You knew what you were doing when you were cheating on him. But I think that, and I said this in a Patreon video that I filmed that I will link down below. It's also on my YouTube members. Shout out to that. You might not want to pay me a monthly fee after I say this stuff, but hey, I think that there are people who have abandonment issues who will act out almost like children and test people and see, well, if I do this, will they leave? If I do this, will they leave? If I do this, will they leave? And behave as badly as they can to see if that person is going to leave them. And that, I feel, is what she was doing when she cheated on her husband, because she said, like, by the end of it, she didn't even like the guy. She was just doing it because she could, basically. And she, like, made this whole plan to leave with him. And then it was like, wait, I don't want to do this anymore. She confessed, told her husband, and he decided that he was going to leave her because he could not live with her and what she had done to him and what she had done to their marriage. So that was devastating for her because in her mind, she's a child thinking, well, does he love me enough to forgive this thing that I'm about to do? And it's like, no, because nobody should love you enough to forgive that thing that you're about to do. But because you're so traumatized, you think it will only be true love if you can push and push and push and push the boundaries until. That sounds a lot like my ex who was emotionally abusive to me, who would do that constantly pushing my boundaries, constantly asking for things, demanding my time, my energy, my attention, even when I said that I did not have much more left to give, because it seemed like in their mind, they were like, well, if you don't give it to me, if you don't betray yourself for me, then you don't actually love me. They would say to me, like, I don't want you to betray yourself to me. I want you to do what you want to do. But then when I said, no, I actually can't do that, they would be like, you don't love me. You don't care about me. I do recognize that. I honestly think that she probably has some undiagnosed cluster B personality disorder, or like, what is bipolar classified as? I don't know what all that is, but that's my opinion as a person who grew up with people with really, if it's in the DSM-5, it's in my family. Watching the situation. I'm not a doctor. I cannot diagnose her, but based off of the behavior that I've seen, I'm thinking borderline personality disorder. I'm thinking bipolar. I'm thinking something, because there's just something about the highs and lows of emotion, the vast mood swings, the black and white thinking, the impulsive behavior, and then like reeling back from the impulsive behavior very quickly, that is odd to me and is going on there. And I could see that through the TikToks. I could see that on TikTok Live. What person who's completely sane and completely well goes on TikTok Live and blows up their entire life? What person who's completely well will cheat on their husband with someone that they don't even like that much, plot to leave their husband for that person, and then at the last second say, actually, I don't feel like doing that anymore. Like, it doesn't add up. I think there's something going on that is not diagnosed and that cannot be diagnosed because she does not have access to the level of mental health care that she actually needs. Because honestly, there's so many therapists in Utah, but so many of the therapists in Utah are completely useless. Like Jody Hildebrandt was a therapist in Utah. There are people I've seen in Utah who have been going to therapy for almost a decade and nothing has changed. And are you going to a licensed practitioner of therapy who had to go to a college that is not Brigham Young University and get a degree there? Or are you going to a church recommended therapist that the Mormon Church has put on this list of people who are recommended as practitioners? Because Jodi Hildebrandt was on that list and she's in prison now for child abuse. So I'm saying that to say, I saw her behave erratically on TikTok. I saw her act wild on the internet. Dakota Mortensen has the same internet that we all have. He could also see that she was behaving erratically. He could also see that she was just getting divorced. He could also see that she was in a very low, very vulnerable point in her life. And that is when people who want something from you, who want to extract things from you, pounce on your life. With my ex, I wasn't necessarily at a low in my life because I had just gotten into graduate school. I was getting ready to move to Scotland and I was trying to date for the first time ever, right? So I was like, I'm going to get on the apps and I'm going to start dating. I met this person and I told them that from the beginning that I'm in this big transition period. And that's a problem. We can give away our power very quickly. We can hand people the tools that they need to destroy us. Because one of the first things that I said is the last relationship that I was in really destroyed my self-esteem. I was with a person who made me feel absolutely disgusting about my face, my body, everything about me basically. And I'm just hoping to like date around right now. I'm going to Scotland. I can't be in a serious relationship. I don't want to do long distance because my last 2 relationships were long distance and they didn't work out and it was too much time and too much energy for me. So I don't want to do that. And I laid all my cards out on the table because I'm thinking, let me be as clear as possible with this person so that they know exactly what they're getting into. They're thinking, how can I use this information to my advantage, basically? And it almost feels like bad characterizing it as that because I don't think that people are necessarily twirling a mustache and plotting all the time when they see others in a vulnerable situation. But there are some people who there's something that they want out of that person. And if you give them all of this information about the place that you're in your life, you make it so much easier to get that thing that they want out of you. And so I entered that relationship telling her basically everything I needed to hear in order to be trapped. And then after 6 months, I'm in a long-term relationship. We're talking about marriage, which was crazy. She was going to come live with me for free for 6 months in Scotland because of everything that was going on with the election. And I looked around and every time I would get on the phone with her, my body would become so dysregulated. I couldn't breathe properly. I couldn't think. And I was in my first semester of graduate school, basically on the phone 24/7 with someone who was in the United States. And if I said that I couldn't call, if I said that I didn't have time, if I said that I was unavailable, it was a problem. It was, you don't love me, you don't care about me, you hate me, you're just using me just like everybody else. Like all of these like horrible, horrible ways that I was dug at from basically the second week that we knew each other until the relationship ended. And that trauma bond of me being traumatized by this person and bonding even further with them. So I wasn't physically in a low place. Like I hadn't actually experienced the level of loss that Taylor had experienced when she entered her relationship with Dakota. But like mentally, I was in a low place because I had very, very low self-esteem from the end of my engagement with that person who made me feel absolutely disgusting about myself. So I told my ex that, and immediately they knew exactly what to say to me to make me think, oh, this is not the same as that last relationship. I think a similar thing happened with Taylor and Dakota. Taylor was in a very low place in her life, and he, whether consciously or not, knew, look, this is a girl with millions of followers. This is a girl with very traditional values. This is a girl who thinks I'm cute. I could probably get something out of this. The speed at which she got pregnant, the speed at which he was talking about marrying her, it all was just very suspect. And then to watch them be in a relationship the first season, to watch him lie to her time and again, gaslight her. Like, people are not saying Darvo just to throw around a buzzword. In isolation in the video, you cannot prove that Darvo was happening in that moment. Darvo stands for deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. So that is kind of like the playbook, particularly for emotional abuse. Someone will tell you something that you've done or how they feel about something. you deny, then you attack, and then you reverse the victim and offender. So you say, actually, it's you who has hurt me because you have brought up this thing that I did that hurt you. So in that video, we don't see that that's happening. People are assuming that it's Darvo because people are associating that video with reactive abuse, but we don't 100% know in that instance. What we do know is that over the course of 4 seasons of The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, we have watched Dakota use Darvo with Taylor time and time and time again. Season 1, he's lying to her about hooking up with Jenna. And she says to him, did you hook up with this girl? Like, did you guys have a situation? Deny. No, we didn't hook up with each other. Like, we didn't have any kind of situation. Attack. How dare you imply that I would be unfaithful to you? I'm not that type of person. You know that I'm not that type of person. Reverse victim and offender. It actually really hurts me that you would insinuate that I would do something like that to you and that you would call my character into question in this way. And then at the end of the season and the beginning of the next season, we find out actually he was lying about hooking up with Jenna the entire time. And that was Taylor's final straw, was the lies. We get into the other people that Dakota hooked up with, right? In season 3, he hooks up with her family friend, her mom's friend. He Darvo's again, denies it, then attacks her for bringing it up, then reverses victim and offender by saying that it was a traumatizing situation and how dare she talk to him about this thing that traumatized him, right? And then in season 4, again with Shania and again with Jenna, because she has a particular trigger about Jenna, he hooks up with both of them and then Darvo's her when she responds to it. And she's so conditioned, it seems, by his Darvo tactics that she doesn't even lash out at him anymore. She just goes straight to the girl. She'll just say, this hoe, this skank, this. And again, I'm not defending her because genuinely, I don't think she's that good of a person, honestly. Like, she might have a good heart. She might be kind on a one-to-one basis in some of her interpersonal relationships. But what I've seen from this show, this is not a woman who I'm going to be flying a white flag for. Or like, I don't think it's that serious, but I'm saying I see it. And a lot of other people also saw the pattern. He would do this over and over and over again. We would watch him instigate something, pick at her and pick at her and pick at her. And then she lashed out and he would be like, why do you always do this to me? You just hurt me all the time. And it's like, well, you're the one who did it. You started this dispute. I watched you pick at her and then she reacted. And now you're crying like she did something to you. Like she started the whole situation. And then they would go have sex. Like that, it was the pattern. Watching season 4, you see Dakota, or I saw Dakota's desperation ramp up. At the beginning of the season, it's like he doesn't really believe that she's going to go do Bachelorette because he doesn't really believe that she's going to move on from him. As the season goes on, he starts doing more and more outlandish things to try and get under her skin. They go away to London to film Vanderpump Villa. He hooks up with a girl while he's out there. That pisses her off and sets her off. She's still planning to do Bachelorette though. He then starts hooking up with Miranda's best friend of 10 years, Shania, who's directly associated with the Mom Talk group. That sets her off. She's rampaging and yelling at everyone, giving Miranda ultimatums saying you can't be friends with her if you want to be friends with me, like, which is crazy, but, and so we're not going to get into that. And very hypocritical, honestly, because she was doing her little weird like flirtationship with Chase at that point, and Chase is Miranda's ex-husband. Meanwhile, Miranda didn't do anything with Dakota. Miranda's friend did something with Dakota, and Taylor is acting as though it was Miranda. And then finally, he hooks up with Jenna, who, like I said, she has a particular sore spot about because Jenna represents everything that Taylor will never be. She's white, she's thin, she's blonde. Well, Taylor's thin, but like she is the perfect Mormon ideal, and Taylor will never be able to access that because she is half Latina. Like, and while Latino people they can be white, they can be black, they can be indigenous, they can be Asian. They are, generally speaking, particularly in the Southwest where there is like larger populations of Latino people, because it used to be Mexico. They are very racialized. They are considered to be even further away from whiteness, whether you're mestiza or full-blooded, like white, both your parents are Polish, you just so happen to have been born in Mexico, right? And so he's doing all of this stuff. She's not stopping the train. Like, she's not getting off the Bachelorette train. Finally, right before she's set to go, he sleeps with her. Like, that is supposed to be the ultimate gambit. That is supposed to be like the trump card that makes her say, I don't want to do this anymore. Cancel everything. Cancel the shoot. Cancel the show. I'm not going to be the Bachelorette. Let's run away together, you and me, Dakota. Or even just, I'm quitting, and then he can go off and do whatever he wants to do. But she doesn't do that. She gets on the plane, she flies to California, and she films a whole season of The Bachelorette. She even goes so far as to get engaged to another man who is not him. And I think that that was an ego wound that he could not deal with. He could not handle the fact that she refused to marry him who she has a baby with, but she agreed to marry this man who she had known for what, max 30 days, like 60 days maybe, while filming this television show. And so from the moment she got engaged, that season of Bachelorette was never going to see the light. If he had anything to say about it, if Dakota had anything to say about it, that season of Bachelorette was never going to see the light of day. He couldn't stop her from filming it, but he could stop ABC from airing it. And so that's why people are saying it feels like the timing is very convenient of when all of this stuff is coming out. It feels very calculated because we watched him on season 4 of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives desperately try and stop this woman from going to shoot The Bachelorette. I think part of it was about him not wanting her to eclipse him so thoroughly and like get so far away from where she was when she met him, basically. And the other part was this like ego wound about her getting engaged to somebody else. And so now all of this stuff is resurfacing. Now, do I recognize that that feels very minimizing, particularly of men's experiences of domestic violence? Yes. And like I've said many times, I feel horrible. And I know that I am projecting my own experience and I'm drawing my own conclusions based off of what I've seen. I don't know the truth of the situation. And I'm not trying to say any of this to defend Taylor, as I've said many times. I'm just saying that as a survivor myself, seeing how Dakota has behaved and how he has treated Taylor on camera, I see more similarities between her as his victim and me than I do between him as her victim and me. And you could say it's because I don't have an experience of physical abuse, but like I don't want to tell too much tea, but like that's not it. It's basically what I will say. It's not that. And this story, I hate this story. This story is triggering not just because it reminds me of the emotional abuse that I suffered in my relationship, but also because it reminds me that these are the stories that are perfectly built to fuel the gender-based divides that lead to things like the manosphere. I told you we were going to get macro at a certain point. Here I am like banging around about how bad I feel and what's the point of that contrition if I don't offer something as a form of reconciliation. That's a little sneak peek of what we're going to talk about soon. And that is my bird's eye view of the structures that not only produced this relationship dynamic between Taylor and Dakota, but also produced the reaction and could potentially produce the reaction to the reaction, and what I think we all need to focus on as we contend with what's going on. So when we're in situations like this and you see clear video evidence of a man being physically abused by a woman, and the world's wider response to it is not swift and uncomplicated condemnation of that woman, but is instead hedging and contextualizing and excusing, and in fact calls for more violence against that man. I can see how there would be young boys and men who look at that and respond and say, see, when it happens to men, everyone makes fun of it. And this is kind of what they've been trying to say through the manosphere for years, which is that because it's all very tied up in a ball, because it's stupid, but it does come from a real feeling, is what I'll say. The nugget of that feeling is men and boys watching situations like this and making it equivalent to structural oppression, because to them it serves as further proof that because women are deemed to be the weaker sex and less intelligent, and women are objects of men's and romantic desire, women have power in the world. They can access wealth and ease and use their wiles to get ahead in life and or get out of facing accountability for wrongdoing. Meanwhile, men face consequences. Men have to suffer. If a man is accused of abuse, he goes to prison and everyone condemns him and nobody wants to be associated with him anymore. And he's next to the devil in the dictionary of evil, right? And have none of the advantages. Men get their lives ruined for acting badly and have none of the advantages that women have to get ahead without having to do any hard work or what they deem as not hard work. Of course, there's a flattening there, like even if you're talking about sex workers, like sex work is work. It's actually a lot of work to pretend like they like you men, but hey, that's not what we're trying to get into. We're trying to understand the reality of the feeling here. I mean, it's a real feeling. It's a real sense of injustice. And there are women who buy into this too, right? I think about the mom from the first season of White Lotus. Speaking of White Lotus, I'm going to make a whole video about that and about Mike White. So stay tuned for that. It could take me a year, but it's coming. And these people think that they're being subversive and edgy and they're defying the status quo because they're talking about the real truth, which is that women have power over men, not the other way around, because women get to have things easy and they don't have to face the consequences of their actions. Like Taylor doesn't have to face the consequences of her actions. People are making a bunch of excuses for her and she's going to get off scot-free. Meanwhile, everyone hates Dakota and everyone's always hated Dakota and he's this big villain and whatever. And because of all of this, women are the real oppressive class and they need to be put back in their place because back in my dad's day, he never had to face any of this. And while all of this discussion is happening, while we're fighting against those guys and saying, no, actually, women are oppressed because of X, Y, and Z, and while they are continuing to persist in their misguided belief that they are somehow subverting societal expectation by being misogynist, nothing gets fixed. Nothing gets done. No one is having an actual productive conversation. And we all stand around hating each other and we're just thinking that it's activism. I want to be very clear and say again that I know that this feeling is real. And I think it's important to acknowledge that because I think that that is the first step to deprogramming these manosphere red-pilled men. Your feelings are real. They come from a real place. Do I think they're valid? That's a different question. But they do come from a real place. Being alive is hard. It's incredibly difficult to navigate being a human being, especially with the strictures and structures of capitalism and under the weight of capitalism, especially as someone who is supposed to be of this upper class, this like powerful class, and the expectations that might come along with that. As a man, you're expected to be strong, attractive, wealthy, all of these things that will ostensibly get you more access to women. And not every man is that. Not every man can ever be that. You know, some people are just ugly. Some people are just weak. Some people not great at conversation. And there is a real pressure and a real frustration at the inability to match up to the standards that are held for men. And that's because patriarchy is a system that oppresses us all in different measures, not an equal measure, in different measures, but it oppresses us all. And so there is something true about them looking back at the past and saying, it didn't used to be like this. Women didn't used to be able to get away with this. Because we didn't. The difference between this like back in their day and like this past that they're gesturing towards, trying to convince their women to be trad wives and be in their feminine while the husband is in their masculine. The difference between that past and today is not that women were in their place as subservient beings and not working and out of the house and wearing dresses and wearing skirts and not doing anything, because that's not true. Like women have worked always. It really was just like upper class white women who didn't work throughout Western history, but that's a discussion for another day. That's not like, they think that that is what's going to fix this like negative feeling that they have inside of themselves if they put women back in their place. But the truth is that the main difference is that it didn't used to be okay to speak negatively about men. If you were a woman and you made fun of men or you hated men or you condemned men, by and large, as a group, you would be condemned for that. You would be ostracized. You would not be celebrated. The difference is today, because we understand misogyny, we understand structural power. If you say something bad about men, it will become a meme. It will become a trend. People making fun of the male loneliness epidemic. There was that time in the 2010s where women were drinking out of their male tears mugs. The phrase men are trash. All of these things hit because there was a frustration that women felt towards men as the group oppressing them and towards misogyny that was expressed through these phrases. And that hurt men's feelings in a very real way. It makes you feel bad if you see a group that you are a part of being maligned by and large and painted with a broad brush. And I know that because Black, women, queer, ADHD, mentally ill, like any type of oppression that I can have, physically disabled, like any type of oppression that I can have, I have it. And so I understand that it is not fun to see a group that you're a part of be maligned on a public scale and have that malignedness, malignition, have those stereotypes celebrated and boosted and constantly shared, and to see it constantly. The Problem is when you turn that negative feeling into proof of your own status as an oppressed class. I think it comes from a very short-sighted view that the reason that women are saying that men are trash and drinking out of male tears mugs is because men make them feel bad. When really it's because we are carrying the weight of generations and generations of patriarchal and misogynistic oppression in our bodies. Like epigenetics teaches us that trauma is passed down through your DNA. Imagine how much trauma women are carrying, particularly women who come from or live in societies where patriarchy has been institutionalized for centuries. Imagine how much we're carrying. And then you add on top of that a man who might be mean to you. There's a different weight there than a woman being mean. So what they're seeing is that men in the past didn't have as many problems, and they think it's because their lives were easier and their like the human condition was easier for them because they had women underneath them in women's proper place. But it's not that the human condition was easier for them. Like it still was hard to be a man, whether you were working a union job and had benefits and were married to a stay-at-home wife and had your 2.5 children and were like just barely scraping by making payments on your mortgage, and what it is to be a man today, you know, it's still hard because being human is hard, and being human throughout time has been hard. The difference is those men in the past did not see constant imagery of people saying men are horrible, men are bad, and have that imagery and have those words reified and held up in the way that men today do. So I think that's what the real difference actually is, but that doesn't deny that we have to recognize and prioritize the structures of oppression when we are having these discussions. Because if we talk about everything as though it's all equal, we talk about like, say, there's a lot of people who have been saying, you know, well, if Taylor was a man, well, she's not. So we have to take that into account. Well, based off of what I saw in the video, she's the abuser, he's the victim, that's it. Well, yes, in that situation, she's the abuser, he's the victim. Over the course of their relationship, there is very likely a more nuanced story being told than just she's the abuser and he's the victim. And so I don't know if that like helps you to understand kind of why so many people have been having the reaction that they've been having to this situation, why I had the particular reaction that I'm having to this situation. Until I have more information, I kind of am sitting where I'm sitting, and I can acknowledge that it doesn't feel good to have like a bad take, but here I am, you know. I started this video off by saying that I didn't think that Taylor should ever have been on television, and I stand by that. Again, I can't diagnose her, but I know what I think about her. You know, I always think about Demi talking, it was either in season 1 or season 2. Taylor was talking about how like the violence was in her past, and Demi said, "Are you sure about that? Let's go ask Dakota," right? The problem with Demi is that I've said this in the past in my Secret Lives of Mormon Wives videos, she's often right, but she's so unlikable that nobody listens to her. And so this physical aspect of their DV in their relationship was probably going on for way longer and than any of us know, and could have been happening behind the scenes while they were filming the show. And that's just further proof to show that she never should have been on TV. That's not something that Hulu should have excused. That's not something that we as an audience should have excused. And in a way, we're all kind of complicit. And I don't want to defend Taylor because I think that she and her actions are indefensible. I think you can't be a good mom, as she asserts that she is, and as how many people in her life assert that she is, if you get so blacked out angry at your partner that you don't realize or don't care that your child is in the room when you are throwing things at that person very near to your child. I don't think she should ever have been cast as the Bachelorette, and that would have been even without these newer revelations of DV, because of the first revelation of DV and because of her continued entanglement with Dakota. I don't think she was a safe entity, but they gambled. And one of my favorite creators on here, I will link her video down below, she talks about how the Taylor Frankie Paul season was a gamble, and they gambled that they would make more money through her shocking antics than they would lose through people choosing not to watch the show because of who the Bachelorette is. And they lost that gamble. That's what you do. When you play with fire, you get burned. I mean, I would not have watched back the dailies of this last season of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives and thought that this was a woman who was in any way ready or needed to be on the type of platform that is on the level of The Bachelorette. I saw Charity Lawson say, The Bachelorette is not a place where you go to find healing. And that's true. But I also know that her as a Black woman and one of 2 or 3, I think, Black Bachelorette, she would never have been afforded this chance if she displayed the same level of volatility as Taylor, let alone having 3 children by 2 different men the same way that Taylor does. Like, Taylor smacks in the face of all of the family values that the Bachelor and Bachelorette seem to be in favor of and promoting, but they platformed her anyway because they knew that she would make great TV. You don't go on The Bachelorette to find healing, and you don't go on The Bachelorette if you are thoroughly entangled in an abusive relationship with your most recent baby father. It's just not a very good idea. And I could have said that I did say we're probably never going to see this season when she was cast. And yet I think Taylor is a bad partner. I think she's mentally unwell. That's my personal opinion. Once again, I'm not a doctor, so I cannot and I've never been with her in a clinical situation, so I cannot diagnose her. But I also recognize how she got to this moment. And I also know that none of this was inevitable. All of this was preventable. Analyzing her behavior over the course of the last season of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, they should have pulled her out of The Bachelorette before she even got on that plane. It shouldn't have been a choice that she could have made. It shouldn't have been to the point where Dakota could have gone nuclear on her. That she should have never been in that position, because we watched her day after day, again and again, have highly volatile reactions that did not make any sense in reference to Dakota's actions. And the blowback was never back on her. You know, she was not looking inward and going, how did I get myself in this situation? She was yelling at the girls for not telling her that Dakota had slept with Shania, even though the girls didn't tell her because they knew that she would probably sabotage the Bachelorette if they did. She was yelling at Shania and calling Shania a whore and a slut bag and a hoe because she slept with Dakota, a single person, which we talk about his choices of sleeping with people, and we will. She said that she was going to destroy people, like she was going to ruin people's lives. She was posting TikToks about how Shania was a snake for trying to be friends with her while also sleeping with her baby daddy, which I agree with personally. Like, I think it's very snaky behavior to like try and sidle up to someone and be friends with them and then go and sleep with their ex who you know that they're still very like deeply entangled with. I don't get the line. Like, there's been a lot of people online who are saying Dakota's allowed to sleep with whoever he wants. Like, he shouldn't have to think about who's close to her when he's taking into consideration who he sleeps with. And it's like, you wouldn't say that about anyone else. You wouldn't say that about your friend. If your friend came to you and was like, our mutual friend slept with my ex and I was really hurt by it, you would probably be like, damn, I wish they hadn't done that. Like, first of all, I don't think that's a rule that anybody follows in our normal interpersonal relationships, but also it's not that he's just sleeping with people that are close to her. It's that he's doing it and he knows, because he knows it upsets her, because he knows it sets her off. She said many times, I would prefer if you didn't do this. If you want to repair our relationship, you sleeping with people that I know and lying to me about it is a no-go. You cannot lie to me. You cannot do this. And she's telling him exactly what she doesn't want him to do. And then he goes and does it. And then he gets upset at her for breaking up their family and not wanting to be with him. So like, if it was a situation where she was like, I don't give a fuck who you sleep with, and he was sleeping with people in their friend group or who it would get back to her that he was sleeping with, and then she was getting mad, that's one thing. But if she's been very clear to him that she doesn't want him sleeping with people that she's friends with or that she has mutual friends with, even with her mom's friend, and he does it anyway, that's not just like disrespect. That is abuse. That is mental torture and emotional abuse. You're doing exactly the thing that I'm telling you not to do, and then you are manipulating me and getting mad at me for having a negative reaction about it. So that's the first layer of it. The second layer is, even if she did not say to him, I don't want you to do this, please stop doing this, him seeing her reactions and continuing to choose to sleep with people that he knows she will find out about him sleeping with, that is a lack of care for himself, a lack of care for her, a lack of care for that, and a lack of care for her children who live in her house with her. You know how she's going to react to you doing this, and yet you did it anyway. I just don't buy that it is on her solely for how she's reacting and not also him if he knows that it is going to instigate a violently negative reaction from her. It would be one thing if he was sleeping with random women who she had no relation to, and she was just finding out about it like through the grapevine. She stole his phone, she kidnapped his brother and tortured the information out of him. That would be one thing. That's him trying to move on. That's him trying to start a relationship. He met a girl on Tinder. He sleeps with her. She gets pissed. The only times we have seen her get pissed about Dakota sleeping with someone is when it is someone in her circle that they know. That to me feels very clear. It's very similar to when Katie Maloney was upset with Tom Schwartz for kissing Raquel. She said, I don't want you to date anyone on the show. He kissed Raquel, he tried to date Raquel, and then Katie Maloney got mad at him and he was like, why are you so mad at me? Because you did the exact thing that I said that I don't want you to do. And it shows me how little you care for me and respect me. It's not that I defend her, it's that I know how she got here. Now, is this the same level of empathy that I would extend for a man in this situation? I 100% believe that. If I was watching a man be tortured by a woman year after year after year on television and just keep going back, and she's the worst, and then all of this DV stuff was happening and it blew up, I would give the man in that situation the same level of grace that I am giving Taylor, because it's a difficult situation. Well, it's not even really grace that I'm giving her. It's just like, I understand how she got here. I would say I understand how he got here in the same way that I'm saying it with Taylor, because at the end of the day, we're all human, and I've really moved out of my, like, I hate all men phase. Like, I think men are just people. I think that Taylor is a product of the Mormon church. She was created to be this person that she is now. And we can't condemn her without also condemning the system that produced her and the systems that produce people like her. And I'm not just talking about the Mormon church. There are a lot of religious institutions that function like this. There's the Hasidim in New York and very insular Orthodox Jewish communities. There's the Catholic Church. There's IBLP. These institutions produce people who are dysfunctional in the way that Taylor is dysfunctional. They milk them for all of this support, promotion, and money that they can get from them. And then they discard them when the dysfunction that they have sown within their brains becomes too big to handle, too big to keep associated with the group that they were born from. If the Mormon church wants to discard her, if the Mormon church wants to distance itself from her and her actions, it cannot do that without also acknowledging that she would not be like this if she was not raised Mormon. The same way I wouldn't be the person that I am if I wasn't raised Catholic. Like, these things get into our brains from young. This is a direct product of teaching women that their ultimate destiny is procreation and motherhood, not the nurturing of another human life on this planet. This is what happens when women learn from a young age that they can only be worth anything if they find a man. Doesn't have to be wealthy, doesn't have to be nice, doesn't have to be interesting. He just has to exist. And that man chooses them to be the one that they want to marry. And it's not about being a life partner who is supporting the spiritual well-being of their partner in the way that Bell Hooks describes in All About Love. It's simply about being a woman who was chosen by a man. This is what happens when you're taught that your mental illness that you require from being raised by a mother who neglected you because all she was taught was to give birth, not to nurture those human lives that she is giving birth to, and that she needed to languish in a partnership that exists solely to prove her own worth to herself and the entire outside world. This is what happens when you're told that that mental illness that is born in that situation can be prayed away. And I'm going to climb on my Catholic high horse for a second and just say, when unequivocally, I'm not trying to say that the Catholic Church is better than Protestantism. I'm just saying that it's different. Like, I'm describing a difference between these frameworks. I have my own problems because of my Catholic guilt and shame. Protestant people have their own problems because of that. We all have our different issues when we are raised in institutionalized religion. But I will say that because I was raised by a theologian, my dad was a theologian. And like I've said, he did a lot of bad things, but he taught me also how to look at religion and look at the world through a critical lens. And that, I think, is the most important gift that he ever gave me. And specifically picking a church that would also support that, like, vision of religion. To simplify it completely, the big schism between Protestantism and Catholicism is grace versus acts. Protestants think that you are saved through grace, through believing in Jesus and him bestowing his grace upon you and forgiving you for your sin through that grace. Meanwhile, Catholics believe, by and large, that your acts are what redeem you. That in order to receive forgiveness and get closer to God, you basically have to apologize to him for the sins that you have committed. So whereas in Protestantism, you might sin and sin and sin, and over time you go inward and you have your conversations with God and you pray about it and you struggle with it and you grapple with it personally. But very importantly, you keep it to yourself and you keep it quiet. God will forgive you over and over again through this private relationship that you have with him. In Catholicism, your reconciliation has to be public. There's a whole sacrament of reconciliation. You go to confession. You speak to the priest. You speak your sins out loud in the holy sanctuary. You apologize, and then you go over a plan to reconcile with God, basically. It's about repair. It's about making sure that when you do wrong, you take accountability for it to who you have wronged and you find a way to fix it. Now, we make all our jokes about how, like, you kill someone and then you say 5 Hail Marys. Like, that's the thing about confession, is that it's not always the most, like, robust contrition that you have to do. That being said, it teaches, or it at least taught me growing up, that I cannot do wrong unto someone else without acknowledging that wrong that I have done and asking what I can do to make it right. Now, of course, there are Catholic people who don't live like this. There are Protestant people who recognize that framework. I'm not trying to essentialize. I'm just saying, like, this is the culture, right? And so, generally speaking, we live in a Western world that is Protestant, that is aligned with Protestant values and Protestant virtues of hard work and being covered up and not being promiscuous and, like, all of the things that you would associate with, like, Puritan religion. Another thing that our wider society is steeped in is this sense that grace is enough to achieve forgiveness. You might say, yeah, I've done a lot of bad things in my past, but you don't necessarily have to do something about those bad things in order to be forgiven. And I think that is where Taylor's own personal reaction to this is rubbing a lot of people the wrong way, because she's just doing what she was taught to do her whole life, which is go internal, deal with herself, deal with this in private, apologize to God for the transgressions that she has committed against him, and then find a way to resolve that, like, internally without involving the public. What the public would like is not exactly what the Catholic framework is. The public would like her to be flogged on a, like, stand. Like, they want the shame scene from Game of Thrones. There's a space in between, like, you don't have to do anything to be forgiven except exist, and you have to be flogged in order to be forgiven by God. And that space is, like, the sweet spot that we need to work in. That is what people talk about when they talk about holding people accountable. As someone who was raised by, like I said, a theologian, I'm looking at the way that she is reacting to the situation and the way that she seems so calm about it and unfazed, and she's moving on like nothing's happened. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, of course she's doing that, because that's what she was taught in Mormonism. My dad specifically taught me to grapple with religion, to question the things that the church tells me, to read the Bible and interpret it from a metaphorical lens, not take everything literally. I remember I asked him if the flood with Noah actually happened, and he was like, that was a metaphor. Like, he was like, what are you talking about? I was not taught to take Catholicism at face value, but I can only imagine how I would have been raised and grown up if I was taught that I don't question anything when it comes to religion. And that's how Taylor was raised. You don't question anything. You take everything at face value. You accept that you're always going to be flawed, but you work your hardest to become perfect. So it's not surprising to me that she doesn't know how to take accountability or be contrite in the public, because she wasn't raised in a framework that would prize that. And also, we've seen her mom, and her mom is a terrorist. Like, that lady is weird. But we've also seen her mom and her mom's relationship with her stepdad and her stepdad's relationship with her, and how she really takes blame for a lot of things that have gone wrong in her life, whether it's hers to take blame for or not. She'll pile that stuff on top of her, and she'll internalize, well, I did this, it's my fault, I'm a horrible person, I know that, like, all of these things. And, like, it's everything from having sex out of wedlock to throwing a chair at her baby daddy. Like, there's different levels of badness that she's doing, but she's internalizing all of it and heaping all of it onto herself. I don't have, like, a joyous or easy or clean place to land, because, like I said, I think this is just a really horrible situation, and it's triggering on many different fronts. I apologize deeply if I hurt anyone in the process of working through my own thoughts about this, but I just, like, something that I needed to get off of my chest as a person who watched a mother be abused most of my childhood, told myself I would never be in that same situation, and then found myself in that situation a couple of years ago. And also as a person who grew up in a household where my father was mentally and emotionally abusive towards my mother, and I watched her fight back, and I was proud of her for fighting back, and I also was angry at him for treating her the way that he did, and I also loved him more than I think I've ever loved anyone. My parents are like two of the best people that I've ever known. And I know that they've both done things that they would not be proud to have me share on the internet, so I will not. But I feel so lucky that I was raised by them. And I know it's kind of a rose tinted glass to look back on my childhood. And look, I have Pisces in the 5th house. Like, if you know astrology, you know what I mean. Like, I look at my childhood with very rose colored glasses. But like, genuinely, I wouldn't have ever wanted a different pair of parents. But I do wish that they had had a different relationship to one another so that I could have a different relationship to myself and to my partners moving forward. So I guess the ending for me is that I am thinking about the children more than anyone else in this situation. And I'm thinking about myself as a child watching the women that I love and care about be treated like they're nothing, and what that taught me and what it taught me to watch the men that I loved and cared about lash out at those women, and how I felt knowing that sometimes they both were doing very bad things to one another, and I was caught in the middle, and there was nothing I could really do about it. I guess the conclusion is liberate the children. I guess that's the conclusion. The conclusion is children are an oppressed class, and we need to recognize that. That's all I have to say today. This is a bit of a more somber one. I can do like a full review of season 4 of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I watched the first 2 episodes and then I skipped to the last 3 because I was just like trying to see the Shania of it all and I wanted to like understand, but I will watch the rest of the show and make a review video. It'll be a little bit late after the show comes out, but like my season 2 review did kind of pretty well considering that I put it out way after season 2 came out, if I'm remembering correctly. That's it for now. Like I mentioned, I have a Patreon and a YouTube membership that are live, and you can click on those. The link for my Patreon is down below, and the link to join my YouTube members is also down below. Yeah, I'm going to be coming at you with a lot of newness very, very soon. As you can tell, I have a lot to say. I never stop fucking talking, and it's exhausting. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this and for listening to it and for engaging with me on a human level. I know people can tend to be very like reductive and reactionary on the internet, but if you watched this and it challenged you in some way or it made you think, I would love to hear about that in the comments down below. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, I would love to hear about that in the comments down below. I just think it's a really hard situation, and like I said, my heart is broken for those children and for the child version of myself. But yeah, that's going to be it for me today. I will catch you in the next one. Bye.